Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my recap and review of Outlander Season 6, Episode 3, Temperance. As usual, this will be me recapping what happens in the episode and giving my opinions on how well this translates from what I remember of the book, and how I feel about the episode from a book lover's perspective. If you are looking for commentary that does not correlate with the books, this isn't the place for you. This is where us book lovers can nerd out, and people who haven't read the books who want to know, a book lover's opinion on it can get that, because I understand if reading this series is a lot. I understand. I highly recommend it, but I do have empathy for that. So let me just start off before we get into this. I thought that every actor in this episode acted their fucking pants off, okay? Pardon my curse, or don't, I don't care. I'm a potty mouth sometimes. But holy goodness, sweet Mother Mary the Bride, this was epic acting in this episode. I was transported, and specifically, we're gonna get to it, but specifically Caesar Domboy, I hope that's how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry if it's not. And his scenes showing the utter devastation and depression and suicidal attempt in this episode. There was a warning at the top. I made a mark, it had the suicide warning, so I knew what was going to happen in this episode. And man, was it impactful. It was played so perfectly that I was stunned. And I love when that happens. And I'm used to that happening for certain actors. I'm used to Sam being able to do that. I'm used to Kat being able to do that. But it was excellent. So today there's just water. It was my birthday this previous weekend. It's not that I went bananas or anything, because I turned 29. I'm getting too old to, in my opinion, you're never too old to do whatever you want, but so today I have water in my Dinnerfash Sassenach mug. And we're going to dive in, because this episode we didn't have a we didn't have a cold open this time. We did have the recap and then the opening titles, and then we had the rescue scene with Roger, which another scene that it was on my scenes I want to see this year in the season. And so they're just knocking those out of the park. This scene starts with Roger is, I can't remember exactly, was he chopping wood? I can't even remember exactly what he was doing, but we got to see him be a freaking beast and be the man that I love. I feel like this is not depicted in fiction very often, that kind of very strong, tough man of God vibe. I know this is a weird thing to bring up, but I've shared many times on my channel, I'm a Christian, and I have a lot of strong, tough men of God in my life. And I feel like in film and movies, they're often portrayed as either having an ulterior motive, or they're made as kind of slimy or creepy. And I understand that, because that has been throughout history. There have been those figures. But when there's a man who I would consider righteous, and by that I mean they try to do what is right as best they can, and they have a strong faith, and I see them being these protectors and these men of worth, I just get so excited, because those are the men that I've seen in my life, and I know that's not everyone's experience, but I also know that it is a lot of people's experience. And so Roger to me is that. But okay, let's dive into it. So some children of the Ridge have been told by their parents that Henri-Christian is touched by the devil, or he is of the devil, and they've heard that if he floats on the river in the water, then he is a demon, and that if you touch him, he will burn. Well, children listening to their parents, not realizing that if you're in a freaking basket, the basket is what's going to float, not the baby, it's the freaking basket. And so Roger saves him before he goes over a waterfall, and all the boys are going to run away. And these boys, it included Germain was with them, because he wanted kind of to like help prove it, but also he's a child and not realizing what he's doing. And then there was Amy McCallum there as well, and they try to run away, and Roger says, "Don't you dare run away," and he baptizes Henri-Christian right in front of them, and he says he belongs to God, you wee bastards. I love it so much. And they explain what they thought, and he was like, you guys are stupid little kids, you know. So then we have the family together, and Claire is, you know, saying that he's okay and everything, and Roger is being really the calm head in this, because obviously he's upset too. You know, it's not like, oh, it totally makes sense that they did this, but he's trying to have like a calm head about it, you know. And Fergus is just feeling so many emotions. Like, he's feeling disgusted. He feels like it's his fault that Marsali was beaten, and that's why Henri-Christian is a dwarf, and just all these things. And so he walks out. I meant to say too, sorry, let me retract that. The scene in the river with Roger, that to me was directly from the book, the way it played. I absolutely loved it. I loved him baptizing him and claiming him for the Lord. And I just love that. I thought it was so good. I continue to be so happy the change in direction for Roger, the character this season. It is warming my heart because I am a Roger stan. I love him, and I love how we're getting to see the side of him where now that he has a place to put his energy and he's feeling useful to his community in ways, that he's able to, you know, hold his head up and feel that he's contributing and not feel like he's a burden that, you know, Jamie is having to make excuses for. And I really am liking to see that. But anyway, so Fergus stomps out of the house, and Jamie tells them that, or he tells Germain to go collect all the boys that were there, and that they need to meet at the Laird's study by this time, or else he's going to come and find them. So that gets set up, and Roger's like, I'll come with you to go get them all. So they go off to do that. Now we have Claire going to talk to Fergus. I'm probably going to cry a couple times in this recap, so just be prepared now. Because this is the first scene where this actor is portraying some very complicated emotions. And so we have Fergus explaining that he has seen dwarves before when he was in Paris at the brothel, and that the small, you know, they have some different names that they use for them. They were called, you know, they were called mushrooms. They were called, you know, different derogatory terms for dwarfs at the time, little people at the time. And he explains that there was a man called the Master of the Mushrooms, and he was the procurer of dwarfs to the brothel. And there was one named Luke that Fergus had worked with before, as in they had worked with clients before, and he had seen him killed. Well, he didn't see him killed, but he came across him murdered, and the body of this man was sold to the doctors to be dissected and studied, and it left, you know, a very tough impression in Fergus's mind. And so, you know, he's sharing this story, and Claire's listening, you know, and she's like, this isn't your fault. And she's like, do you think that Jamie and I would let anything happen to him? Like, he's ours. And Fergus says, like, these heartbreaking, and this is right from the book, you guys, this whole scene, it's so good. And you can tell too, because this is an uncomfortable storyline, but it is a very powerful one. And I love when the show trusts Diana's words to deal with situations like this, because I feel like that has a lot of impact on me when it's her words being acted by these actors who I do feel are so well cast. I feel like they are very well cast. And so I very much enjoy when it is her words coming out of their mouths, you know? But anyway, Claire's like, do you think we'd ever let anything happen to him? And Fergus says, he's like, I know, madame, but you're not going to live forever. And I'm not even going to live forever, you know, like, and what will become of my son who can't do anything, you know? And it's very difficult to try to convince Fergus that he is of use to them. And we're going to see when Jamie takes a crack at explaining this later on. But, you know, Fergus is in a spiral with this, and it's so hard to see it. And it's so hard to see mixed with his alcoholism at this time, and it's so just like all twisted up, you know, it's very uncomfortable, and it's so hard to see, you know. So then we have Claire getting back to the house, and Tom Christie is there waiting, and Claire is like, have you been saying this to your, you know, people, like they are mistreating them? And Tom says, this is very interesting too, he says, like, I'm a man of science, like I know that this isn't of the devil that this happened. It's very unfortunate, and I am not encouraging my people about this. That's it to be seen, like how he's really standing up for him. It's so interesting, this actor, like it really is, because I really need to reread some parts of the book with Tom in it, because I feel like he does such a great job portraying him. But I know in the book that I had much more complex feelings for Tom Christie in the book. Like, I wasn't in love with him or anything, but I thought he was such a complex, layered character. And I think in this episode we see even more of that, because there are a lot of scenes with him and Claire in this episode, and a lot of straight up like book scenes for me that really built that, like, because you aren't sure, like, is a camaraderie building between them? Is there this friendship that's maybe building between them? Like, what is going on? What does he think of Claire? Like, what is going on in this guy's head? And I feel like this actor is just, he's so good at it. It's very interesting. But anyway, Tom is here for the surgery, but he doesn't want to use the ether. He doesn't want to be put to sleep. And he says that that is, you know, like of the devil. And Claire is like, okay, you're not going to want this surgery without the ether. Like, I'm going to cut into your hand and you need to hold still because I need to, like, move things around. Okay. And Jamie, he even, let me see if I am skipping too quick ahead of it. Nope. Yep. We're going to pause because we switch scenes before we get to what Jamie says to him. But Claire's like, okay, well, let me get my surgery ready. One of the things that I think is, like, funny too is, like, he just shows up and she's, like, ready to do the surgery right there. You know, it's definitely like instant medical care, I guess. You know, you're not having to wait, but you also need to be awake when it happens, apparently. So we'll see. Okay, so then we have Roger going around with Germain, and they are talking to the boys. So we stop by the McCallum cabin, and Aiden is like, please don't tell my mom. And he's like, if you will come to the big house when you're supposed to, and the laird doesn't have to come after you, I won't have to tell your mom about it. But then he hears Amy scream inside, so he runs inside, and Amy is like, the milk is making a sound, and I think it's haunted. You know, she's very like, I don't get it. And so Roger's like, so he goes and lifts it up, and there is a toad in the milk. There's a toad in the milk. Or a big bullfrog or whatever. And she's having a little bit of a crisis of faith of, like, why she's here. You know, she doesn't have her husband. And she's just feeling very overwhelmed. And Roger says to her, she's like, I'm here on my own, and I'm going to starve. And, like, what is God's plan in all of this? And Roger says to her, he's like, well, I don't know what God's plan is, but I can promise you, I won't let you starve. That's all that I can promise. But, you know, like, it's going to be okay here. And I don't know how, like, people who haven't read the book are feeling about this, or what they think of this interaction between, like, Amy and Roger. I love it. I really do. I love Amy McCallum. I am so, like, sympathetic towards her. And I love that Roger is helping out. You know, he's being kind of a father figure to her son. I know as a book reader, I know this is completely a platonic situation. There's no danger to Bree and Roger from this. I don't think that the show is even tinging it romantically, which is good. I was afraid that they would make it seem more like that. I'm glad Amy isn't seeming like she's flirting with him, because this is a platonic relationship. She's not trying to weasel her way in anywhere. Roger, of course, isn't even, he loves Bree. He's not even thinking that. He is kind of a role of a minister, and he's still like, whenever it's brought up to him, because she mentions like, you did a great job preaching, he's like, well, I'm not really that, but you can tell that he kind of enjoys the praise about, you know, doing a good job speaking, but he's still hesitant to fully say that, like, yes, I'm the minister here. You know, but I like that he's being, you know, that he's being appreciated for what he's bringing. Like, I think that, again, I love Roger, so I love seeing that. But I know that the way that things are going to play out with the Amy and Aiden and Bree and like how that works out will be very interesting. But I really like this. I love the friendship between all of them. And I think that as like a single mom who's in a new place, those relationships are very important. And so I'm sure it will be difficult when people on the ridge start poking their nose into things and like assuming things, because what else do people do on the ridge but gossip? But I really like this. So I put in my notes, I was like, I love this, but I know that people will think it's odd. So then we skip over to Marsali and Bree has like invented this better spinning wheel to help, you know, get things done faster. And we see Jemmy is playing with his little car. She made him a little like four-wheeled car, which could kind of look like a wagon, but we know what it is. And Jemmy calls it a vroom vroom. And Marsali is like, why do you call it a vroom vroom? And Bree has to be like, oh, that's the sound he makes when he plays with it. He says vroom vroom. I love that. That's just the cute little details that there are. And so Marsali is very stressed, and she tells Bree, like, Fergus said he would stop drinking. You know, I hope that he does that. And Bree is like, we're here for you. Like, we're going to support you, and like, it's going to be okay. So we have that moment. Then we go to the beginning of surgery with Tom, and Claire is strapping his hand down because she's going to cut into it and like fix, I don't even know what she's fixing, but there's some things in there. And Tom is planning to like read his Bible through it. And Jamie, and I think this is at the point that he says it, he's like, Claire did surgery on my hand once, and like it works well now, but it hurts, you know. And Tom is like, oh, were you able to make it through? And I mean, it's Jamie's kind of obvious about it, where like, yeah, but he didn't have an option to have ether when she did that to his hand all the times ago, you know. So if he'd had the option for ether, maybe it would have been different, but maybe not. So Claire begins the surgery, and of course Tom is screaming bloody murder, and Claire's like, you have to stay still. I need both my hands. I can't hold yours. And so very quickly he's not able to keep reading the Bible. So Jamie picks up the Bible and starts reading to Tom through the surgery. And it's this very like, I don't know, like it's a really beautiful moment. And we'll come back around to it because Tom has feelings. He's that kind of man where no one can do something nice for him, especially James Fraser, without him having a hissy fit about it. But in the moment of the pain, he accepts it, and Jamie reads different parts of the Bible to him through the surgery. And they're able to get him through it, and Claire says, you need to spend the night here in the surgery so that I can check on it, you know, and make sure it doesn't get infected and all that fun stuff. So then we have Malva is searching. She's in the woods, or I think she's in the woods, or no, she's standing outside the surgery. We see Malva a lot in this episode, so sorry, I was confused. She's standing outside the surgery listening to her father scream and maybe taking a bit too much pleasure out of that. I mean, good on you, girl. Since he's literally having this surgery so that he can be able to beat you again. And Ian comes up, and there's a little bit of flirting between them, and he decides to walk her home. So a little bit of flirty flirt there. Then we have Jamie giving punishment to the boys. So he has all the boys who are responsible for putting Henri-Christian down the river, and he heats up a fire poker. And so there is Henri-Christian over here and the poker over here, because they said if they touch him, they'll be burned because he's from the devil. And so Jamie tells the boys, he's like, you can either touch the bairn or you can touch the poker. Your choice. And of course they all choose to touch the bairn. And then one of the boys said, Mr. Mackenzie said that Henri-Christian belongs to the Lord, and he baptized him. And Jamie says, one of my favorite lines. He says, but whoever else he belongs to, Henri-Christian belongs to me, and best you all remember it. I love this man so much. I love him so much. So then all of the rest of them go, and Germain stays, and he tells him, he's like, and most of all, he belongs to you, Germain. He's your wee brother, and you need to protect him and love him and stick up for him because he's yours. And Germain agrees, and that is a very significant moment in little Germain's life, to be put as the big brother guardian of Henri-Christian. And again, book readers will be feeling my heart right now, because literally in my notes, I'm just like, poor little Germain. There's so much pain, so much pain in that. So now we have one of those high-class acting scenes that I'm talking about here, okay? So Marsali is getting back from being at the big house with the baby, and Fergus is sitting at the table drinking, and Marsali comes in, and the little ones are saying that they're hungry, because Fergus didn't feed them before putting them to bed. He just sat at the table drinking. And Marsali and him go back and forth a little bit. She dumps beer on his head. He's getting very upset. And she just puts her foot down. And she's just like, I'm also able to take care of us, because he is very upset that he wasn't able to take care of her. And she's like, I want you to hear this, and hear this for how I mean it. I'm also capable of taking care of us. You know, it isn't all on your shoulders. And she admits to him that she's the one who killed Lionel Brown. Now, obviously, I've shared before, that is different from the book. In the books, it was actually Mrs. Bug who kills Lionel Brown, and that is the first kind of crack with a whole different storyline, which we, as of yet, have not taken on, so I don't know if anything will ever come of that, so we have to leave that aside. But Marsali says, she's like, I killed him, and I don't feel guilty. She says, I thought I would, but I did it, and the world's a better place because of it. And Fergus is very upset. He's like, I don't need a woman protecting me. And she's like, I mean, you know, what is there to say to that? And so she tells him to leave. She pushes him out. And this is where, I'm sorry to circle back to this, but this is where I do feel that it is like really shown to us that this isn't an abuse situation between them, because he's very upset and he does not lash out physically to Marsali, okay? Again, not excusing that he be an alcoholic and he be those things, but I think it is confirmed that, you know, gripping her hand, the bruise that happened because of that, was not from him initiating harm to her. Especially, like, she is willing to be physical with him. She's dumped stuff on his head. He doesn't go after her. She pushes him away. He doesn't go after her. So I just wanted to put that out there as kind of a, like, to clear his name in the domestic abuse aspect of it. Because, again, even in the books, those things were accidents of him defending himself from her and not him being angry and beating her, okay? Because she says in this, she's like, I watched my mom's life be ruined by this. I will not have a husband who does this. And she says her line that she's said before. She said in season 4, I will have a whole man or I'll have none at all. And I think that's a very interesting statement because Marsali isn't talking about his hand. And I think that Fergus has taken it to mean that at different times, you know, and right in this moment, he's definitely taking that as she means she wishes she had a whole man, you know? But that's not what she means. She means someone who is present with her mentally and physically. That is what she wants as a whole man. She doesn't want someone who is torn up by guilt. And, you know, it's hard to say that too when someone's in depression. Granted, depression wasn't like understood in the time that they are, but we as 21st century people, like, we know that's what she means. You know, we wish that we had a psychiatrist on the ridge who could handle this for us. We don't. But in that statement, when she's saying, I will have a whole man or none at all, I think it can be inferred what she means is, I need you to be present with me and stop, you know, wishing for something else, you know, or hoping you were someone else. Like, she knew what your disability was when she married you. You know, she knew what she was getting into, and she still chose him. And that hasn't changed for her, you know. So Marsali has a lot of compassion for him, but she also has 4 children, and times are hard, and she needs a husband who will do what he needs to do. So now we have Claire and Jamie talking. Claire has a flashback, and she goes downstairs, and what we see is she wants some ether. So she's jonesing. She's jonesing here. And she's forgotten that Tom Christie is asleep in her surgery, and he wakes up when she comes in. And so she's able to kind of defer from the ether by, she gets some food for Tom. She's checking his hand. He's very like, he doesn't want her to touch him. And so she has to say like, I just want to check your hand. I'm just going to make sure it's not infected. And Claire like tracks that. And now he finally asks about her hair, which I really like. It's a detail from the book where not only Tom Christie, like there are a lot of women on the ridge who will be like, why don't you wear a cap on your head? Because it's true, like Marsali wears one. Most of the ridge women wear one, but Bree and Claire don't, just because that's not a thing that they do. And I'm sure it isn't only religious reasons that people wear the caps anyway, because I don't know, Claire's hair is just kind of all over the place this season too. Like, I don't know, I would keep it like braided more, but that's just me. And he's like, why don't you wear a cap? And he mentioned she has a lot of hair, which made me laugh. So they have this kind of back and forth, and Tom tells her, he's like, I don't think you're a witch. He reiterates that, like, I'm an educated man. I don't think that. And so she's like, well, thank you. And I wish he'd kind of like clarify too. It's that I don't think he thinks she's a witch. And part of it is we had that little hint from Malva. I don't know if we've already had that scene or not. I can't remember if she said it to Ian yet. We'll see. But, you know, he's actually seen someone who was like practicing as a witch. He has actually seen that, you know, and I think he just thinks that some of the practices that she does are things he's heard as being, you know, of the devil, right? Right. So he talks about Jamie and that he would, do we say that in this? No, he doesn't say that yet, but does he think I'm one of his men? Because I'm not. And Claire's like, no, but he would do that for anyone. That's what Jamie does. And she's like, wouldn't you? And I think it's very interesting because, like, I do think Tom would help a stranger. I just think he would also then be like, now I'm going to take you to church because I helped you. You know, I think it would be like a very transactional kind of help, whereas Jamie would literally help anyone. I mean, look at the times that's gotten him in trouble. You know, like when he helped Stephen Bonnet, a stranger. He helped him escape the gallows. What happened because of that? But Jamie's someone who will always give people the benefit of the doubt, even if it's to his own detriment, which is very interesting. So then, after that little chat, Tom goes to sleep. Claire goes back up without having ether. And I had one of my friends, we were both like kind of watching it at the same time last night. And she asked me, you know, is Claire supposed to be addicted or not? You know, like sometimes she's using it, sometimes not. And I think that it's good to show sometimes when she doesn't give into it, because this addiction can be a very slow building thing. You know, it's not always pedal to the metal. You're taking the substance every single day and you're absolutely addicted to it. I think for her, she goes to the ether when she's having these flashbacks because she's not trying to calm her way out of it. And that sitting with Tom and chatting actually helped her calm down. You know, also because she couldn't take the ether there because Tom is in the bed that she's been falling asleep in, you know. But I think that talking with him kind of helped her to calm down too. And now she goes back to Jamie. And the conversation that they have is about, she asks him, like, is he afraid of women? He doesn't like, you know, even me touching his hand for healing purposes. And he's just very weird about it. And Jamie explains a lot about what happens in prison. And I thought this was a very tactful way to go through this discussion. I myself, okay, I've shared this many times, like physical touch is one of my love languages. And I could not imagine being in a place where even like casual friendship touches aren't happening. And that in prison, Jamie said you would be so starved for touch. And he says in the night, you know, sometimes there would be a story someone told or a letter they'd get from a loved one, and it would really make you feel lonely. And he says, like, in the night, you'd hear people cry out, and sometimes they would reach for a man near them, either to just hold them or for more, you know. Sometimes you would get punched, and sometimes it would be reciprocated because they're just feeling so starved for affection, you know, and that can be a torture all its own. And, you know, Claire says, I really loved how this was acted because it's just so sweetly talked about, such a tough subject, but without like an awkwardness. Like, it's just so, it's done so well because Claire asks, she's like, did anyone ever try to touch you, or did you ever want to touch anyone else, you know? And Jamie doesn't get offended by that. He doesn't like, well, of course I wouldn't like that because of what happened to me. He's like, no, I was their chief. They love me. They would never disrespect me like that. And he's like, I would just long for sleep because in my sleep, I could dream of you and I could recall you so clearly that I wasn't alone. You know, it's reiterating what he said in a previous episode where she was his angel, you know, and I just love that so much, but it just like hurts my heart so much too. And then Claire is also questioning Malva's parentage because of how old she is. Could she really have been Tom's? So this is the first time that's coming up because of the age that she is. Tom, he was in Ardsmuir before Jamie was, and he left at the same time. When like in the book it was when Tom and them got transported to America, and Jamie went to is it the governor's, wherever he went, wherever John sent him, and Malva couldn't be Tom's necessarily. So very sweet moment between Jamie and Claire. I really love that. So then we had more Ian and Malva, And in this one, I think they're like with the cat tails. They're like flicking cat tails, and there's more flirty flirt between the two of them. I don't really care about their conversation that they were having, but Ian is talking about that he has land, but he's not farming his own land right now. He's working with Jamie, and talks a little bit about Indian life. There's a little bit of sexual tension building between them. She says, oh, my brother is very protective. That's all laid out. Then we have Tom, Christie, and Claire again. We have him getting a checkup on his hand. It's been like a week or so. It's starting to be better. And he's looking at a book that's on the table. And she says, I have trouble sleeping, so sometimes I come down to read. So there is some hints that maybe she isn't always turning to the ether every time. You know, again, more like she doesn't always just give in to this. Sometimes she just has trouble sleeping, and so she's reading in her surgery. So I like seeing, you know, it's not, she isn't a like ether addict right away. It's maybe just a coping mechanism that's not the best. But he's checking out the book, and I believe the book, it's the same book that it is in the book, but I can't remember right now. And Tom is looking at it, and then they have the conversation about books, and he says, I used to think that fiction was bad, and my wife had a lot of books, and I threw them away. I got rid of them. And she's like, well, what changed your mind? And she's like, well, when we were in prison, there was no books. You know, there was nothing to read. There were no words to consume. And he said, but your husband could recall the stories he'd read, and he would reiterate them, and it was able to give us a distraction. And Tom says, in a case like that, I feel like a distraction is not a bad thing, you know, all the time. And Jamie showed his worth that way by sharing stories, you know, and so now Tom appreciates them more. And so Claire's like, why don't you borrow my book and I'll come get it when I come to check on your hand next. And he's like, okay. So he takes the book. Then he mentions Richard Brown, and he says the Committee of Safety they're asking for if they can protect us. And Claire's like, I hope you told him no. And Tom's kind of like, why? And she's like, they're not good people. So this is a bit of a difference from the book, so I want to point that out. There are very few differences from the book this episode, if you can't tell. I'm basically just recounting this to you. Because again, in the books, Tom was already with them at the end of book 5. So in A Breath of Snow and Ashes, when Claire is kidnapped and raped, Tom goes with to get her. So he knows the Brown situation in the books. So that's a bit of a difference. Like Tom, he wouldn't want anything to do with the Browns either, because he saw what happened to Claire, and it was actually very, like, he was absolutely disgusted by what happened to her. So they were already kind of like becoming acquaintances at that time, so that was very tough for him to see. So then we have Malva and Jamie in the forest. And literally all I was thinking was, run, Jamie, run. And if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. But she says she's looking for mushrooms, and Jamie is like, why don't I show you where some are? So they're going for a little walk. He is teasing her a little bit, and she's all like, oh, don't tell my dad that people like me. And he's like, no, I was just teasing you. I won't. And Jamie is like fishing for information about her like mother. And she's like, why do you want to know? And, you know, because Jamie's a bit curious about what's happening. And she says they have the same mother, but she doesn't say anything about if they have the same father or not. Very interesting. Then there's kind of this like a scene where Tom is reading the book, and it has some naughty things. Like, I think the guy, it has fuck, but it says F-U-C-H, like it isn't spelled like F-U-C-K. And whoever wrote this book was saying that he thinks of like fucking all the time or something. I can't remember what the word said. And Tom is like very disturbed. So now it is time for the rents to be due. So there's a big party happening at the big house. The Beardsleys are flirting with Lizzie. We see Marsali talking with Lindsay. I can't remember his first name. they're just kind of like, she's not flirting with him. They're joking around and talking. And then Fergus is drinking and getting loud, and he starts a fight. He throws drinks in someone's face and then like punches the dad, and like all of this stops. And Lizzie says like they were disparaging Henri-Christian and saying bad things about him. And Claire was like, how dare you say that? And even Christie is like, we don't disparage this. We have pity for them, which thanks for saying you have pity. But he does kind of like shout the people down, and he's like, they have opened their home to us and we won't talk that way. So he is like saying something about it, but it's also like, meh. And so there's this back and forth. Okay, so now we start. So Fergus like storms off after this. There was the awkward back and forth. And then we have kind of our final push to the end here. Roger is doing a message, and it is about Moses. So pause. I want to pause for 1 second, because we're at the point now where I don't think that we are going to get the snake scene for Roger's first sermon. Unless, the only way that I think that it could still happen is like Roger isn't officially a minister yet. So I don't know if we'll have an episode where he actually gets like becomes officially one. And then when he has his official first message, like maybe Jamie and Claire will be there. I don't know. But he is preaching, and he's been doing it a while, and we haven't had the snake scene. So I think maybe we might not. But that's okay. They've had so many of the things I've loved so far. I'm sad because I love that moment between Jamie and Roger and everyone. But we'll see. Maybe he will officially become a minister instead of just being someone who's like leading on Sundays, and we'll see. That would just make my joy absolutely complete if we have that. But anyway, so he's doing a message on Moses and, being a stranger in a strange land in the basket. And while he's preaching, there's a lot of stuff going on. So that's what we're going to get into. I need another sip of water here. So Tom has left the book, and he wrote a note. He said, "This is filth, and I would have thought better of you." And Claire kind of smirks. So I think there'll be a follow-up to that, because I'm sure they'll talk about it, but Claire kind of like smirks about it, that he left it. But then also we see Tom's hand is better, and he's whipping Malva. So we see her being beaten with a belt. And Alan is outside the cabin crying. I don't know what this means, but he's listening to her be beat. Then Jamie spies Fergus alone in the woods when Jamie is kilted, by the way. He was fishing and he has kilt on. I was like, why does he have to be wearing his kilt in the saddest part? And he spies Fergus, and Fergus slits his wrists. And Jamie runs down, and they have to like fight because Fergus is trying to let himself die. And Jamie like has to punch him and get his hand around his wrist. And Fergus says, this is for them, so that Marsali can remarry. She can have a husband who can provide for her. And he says, this is for them. I'm nothing. I can't do anything for them. They need a better man. And Jamie has this beautiful speech. I just have a few little snippets from it, but it is so powerful. So Jamie says, he's like, you kept this family together while I was in prison. With one hand, you made some of the finest whiskey to ever pass my lips, and you will do it again. And Fergus says, like, Jamie says, he's like, it's you that we need, not two hands. It's you. And Fergus says, I don't know if I can be that man again. And Jamie says, you can and you will. No one else is going to be able to teach your son what a one-handed dad can do for him and be a success and be a provider. You're going to be the one to teach him that. And it's so true, and I wish we got to see more moments of Jamie and Fraser together. I know there's so much, you know, I could fill 100 hours with the things I wish I'd see portrayed, but they did pick a very powerful moment, and I love Jamie reaffirming him, you know, reaffirming how valuable he sees Fergus as, that he was his first son. Fergus was his first son, and he gave him his name. He sees him as his son. He loves him, and he is a man of worth to him. He's like, you're able to keep my printing press going when we weren't there, and you did all of these things. And you don't need two hands to do that. You don't need two hands to love your family. You just have to believe that, you know? So he brings him home. Claire and Jamie bring Fergus home, and he holds his baby, and he tells Marsali, he's like, never again, you know, and Marsali just welcomes him home, you know? And the only thing that's hard about this, and I hope we touch in on it, is that it is true that sometimes after a suicide attempt, it is the shock that you need to start fresh. But it also is true that you need more than just one moment of clarity for it to happen. So I hope that we continue to like check in with him and see, you know, how he's doing that, how we see him, you know, hopefully pull back from the alcoholism. But it's a beautiful moment. And as I said, like, the acting in this is perfection. Cesar Damba is so good. My heart was being just ripped out because, he just plays that agony where he's so defeated. He plays it so well. And I love it. I hope we get to see more. I know if we follow through with the plot line for Fergus and Marsali that we might not see them as much for a while, but they're brilliant. They're wonderful. Okay, so the last little bit here, we'll try to wrap this up in under an hour. Look at me. Is McDonald has arrived with the guns. Apparently, his request was looked very favorably to arm the is it the Cherokee? No, it's not the Cherokee. Is it the Cherokee? I'm sorry if I just said that wrong. But anyway, so the guns have arrived, and McDonald gives them a paper that says the Boston Tea Party happened. And he's like, oh, you already know about it? And Claire's like, yeah, we heard about it. And so when McDonald walks away, Jamie's like, tell me what it means. And she says, it's here. The war is almost here. So that was the ominous ending of that. So there we go. There is my recap and thoughts about this episode. I was saying to my friends, I can't recall a season with this many book direct episodes in a row. And I'm kind of afraid, like, you know, knock on wood. And I wonder too if it's just because they have so much content to share that it was like, we don't need to be making up anything, you know? Because pretty much on point, every scene that I was watching, at least in my recollection, almost every scene that I was watching is either from the book or something that like would be happening, but like we didn't see it with our eyes, you know? Because that's something in the books, like Ian and Malva, we don't get to see them interact too much because in that book we don't have like Ian's POV a ton, you know? We see Claire seeing interactions between Malva and Ian, you know? So, very interesting. A couple things I would still like to see. I would like to see a Bobby Higgins show up. Would be great. There's, you know, are we going to see some drama with that? I would love to see a Lord John pop up. I don't know if he's going to pop up in this season at all, but I would love to see him show up maybe with Bobby Higgins or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, I will wrap this on up. This episode, I would love to hear your thoughts. I don't want to like steal a thing from Outlander cast. They do something that's called good, better, best, but I would just love to know your like favorite moment of the episode. We'll just do that. You don't have to say a least favorite, but say your favorite moment from the episode. I mean, mine my favorite part probably is the discussion between Jamie and Fergus at the end, because it just rips my guts out. It was beautiful. But I also love Roger rescuing Henri-Christian at the end too. Those are probably my two favorite things. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. These go up weekly from me. I might be playing around with the time that they drop, just because the last couple weeks dropping it at exactly 7 p.m. Central is a little bit of a tight squeeze for me, so I might be moving it around a little bit. But if you are a channel member at the dedicated diva level or above, you will get these as soon as they upload on Sundays. So if you'd like sooner, you know, access to these, you could always do that. So thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to see you next time.